Well, here is a look at a Tea Party manifesto. It's titled Give Us Liberty, and one of the authors is Dick Armey, the former House Majority Leader, chairman of Freedom Works. He joins us from New York City. Good morning, Mr. Armey.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get right to part of the manifesto here. It says, notice that we call for a hostile takeover. We didn't say join the Republican Party. We need to take it over. That's what you say. How come? How come a takeover? What's wrong with the GOP?
Well, you know, obviously in the past few years in office, the Republicans have been disappointing to the small government conservatives across the country. Just a few years ago, they had a plan to, as they believed, assure their permanent majority through a big earmark strategy, which was big spending, and so seriously offended the voters that they in turn lost their majority. So I had been saying for some time to the Republicans within their party across the country, and now to the grassroots activists across the country, that what we have to do is rehabilitate the Republican Party, cause this party to come back around to the small government principles that made it endearing to the nation for the Reagan years and for the contract with America years. And we understand that either Republicans or Democrats are going to hold office. We just want the Republican majority that can emerge to be a bona fide, reliable conservative majority. That is to say, we want to affect the policy dispositions and the policy behavior of the Republican Party. Quite frankly, the Tea Party activists across the country are not interested in politics. They're interested in what policies govern the future of our grandchildren.
Remind us of the principles that you touched on of folks in the Tea Party. What do they believe in a nutshell?
Well, the first thing we believe in is the Constitution. We think it's the greatest act of entrepreneurial genius in the cause of liberty in the history of the world. It served this nation well. America is the greatest blessing to the world in the history of the world, certainly to ourselves with our prosperity and our wonderful freedom and liberties. We want this protected and preserved and well served by those who take an oath of office to serve it. And then secondly, within our own organization, we say everybody is welcome here if you have a commitment to the real principles of freedom, liberty, and small government responsibility. We want your activism, and we want you to pull your weight, and we want you to have a courteous relationship among yourselves and with respect to others. And so we have certain transactional rules of behavior that we ask of one another. For example, no one takes advantage or credit for somebody else's work. Do your share of the work and let your work speak for itself. So it quite frankly is quite a grassroots entrepreneurial effort of decency, respect, and communal commitment to principles that have been endearing and enduring in this nation for 200 years.
Phone numbers on the bottom of the screen for Dick Armey. He's chairman of Freedom Works, the former House Majority Leader, of course, spent a long time in the House, and he's co-author of Give Us Liberty, a Tea Party manifesto. We'll get to your calls in just a second. Mr. Armey, what's been the impact so far of the Tea Party?
Well, obviously, our folks, I think, have a better understanding of what's happening electorally in America, because we take our information on the ground at the grassroots level from the citizens who live in the district. So in the 9 contests that actually have been concluded, where our activists have chosen a candidate in a primary process, our candidate has won in all 9 instances over the establishment candidate. And I think it just clearly demonstrates that because we are the grassroots, we're more in touch with the community than are the oftentimes remote and removed and detached experts from afar.
First call for our guest, Denham Springs, Louisiana. It's Byron on the line for Democrats. You're on with Dick Armey, who's in New York.
Thank you for C-SPAN.
Sure.
This man here that's doing all the talking, he's put out there by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to sabotage anything that this administration that's in power now does. He's been at it since they got in office, and he'll be doing it whenever they leave office.
Dick Armey, are you an agent of the Chamber?
No. I reckon down in Louisiana they're just not getting it very well, and I feel bad that the guys missed the point so much, because again, let me say, I work with real people, real activists from across the country who just simply believe in freedom, believe in liberty, and believe our government should have a responsible adult self-restraint on its own self-indulgences while it does things that must be done in the nation for the community effectively at a cost-effective basis. We have, I don't know if we have any relationship to the chamber. Once in a while we find ourselves on the same side of an issue. Probably almost as often we find ourselves on different sides. So I don't know where this fellow gets his information, but I think he's been reading some comic books or something.
Tea Party has a contract, a set of actions should they take over. So turn these principles, what the Tea Party folks believe in, into a legislative agenda. What would the top 2 or 3 things be that would come forward?
Well, for example, a simplified, fair, equitable tax system, a restraint on big government spending. I think the one thing that I think is the most compelling influence over these folks' activism is they believe this government can, with its horrible free spending ways, put this nation into bankruptcy. So clearly, restraint against big spending, respect for individual liberty. Here we have a government that has the audacity to mandate that everybody buy a product they describe in the area of health concern, to put them into a government-run program that the government can't afford to run. They've already got a financial mess on their hands with Medicare, and now they want to expand it to the entire population. Once you've bitten off more than you can chew, the idea is try to digest it the best you can, don't bite off more. So I think what we're saying to the government is don't eat with your mouth full.
Fairfax, Virginia, Ben, Republican, good morning.
Good morning. Well, where to start? What we're seeing now is Democrats gone wild, and admittedly we had Republicans gone wild in the past when they also controlled the House and Senate and their presidency. So perhaps it'd be more efficient government if there were balance of power, and it's just split between the House and the Senate, the party control. Not one of the first rules of politics to try to define your opponent or define yourself. And I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm sympathetic to the Tea Party movement to some extent, but more so that it's expressing outrage to Democrats gone wild. The spending is just on the path of economic ruin for the country. I think Democrats they've been reminded of the mistakes of the past. I think we have most, if not all, of the values that the Tea Party is espousing. I think we've learned. Despite outrageous things that Harry Reid says, the Republicans were not against slavery. One of my ancestors founded the Republican Party on the sole platform issue of anti-slavery.
Let's hear from Dick Armey.
Well, I think one of the big misconceptions that's out there, and it's kind of promoted by politicians who always act on their own behalf and say insincere things, is the idea that this whole movement only is a reaction to the Democrats' current policies. The clear, stinging, most serious, aberrant policy behavior in office that offends these folks is the vote for the troubled asset relief plan that was in fact President Bush's plan. And I mentioned the 9 cases where we've in fact seen our candidate win and oftentimes incumbent candidate lose. It is that vote. So the fact is, this is a question about policy, not about politics, and certainly not about political parties. Most Tea Party activists have a certain disappointment in both political parties and are drawn from both, a past historical affiliation with both political parties. You see, when you walk among these activists at something like our September 12th March on Washington, there are Republicans and Democrats that are marching in this group that want better policy from more responsible office holders. This isn't all that great of a revolutionary change. We just want people who have the privilege to serve in high office to act like responsible adults.
Dick Armey, how many members, if you can call them actual members of the Tea Party, how many folks around the country are there now, and what are you doing to grow that number?